Good morning.
Morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm fine, thanks.
Wonderful. You're here this morning at Bayaud Enterprises. Please tell me your full name and
Sure.
what you have done with this wonderful organization,
Sure.
and where you're from.
Yeah.
Give us the pertinent, real juicy, good information.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Well, I'm a native of Denver, Colorado, so
Ooh.
I've lived here most of my life. But anyway, when I graduated from college, and I went to college in Kansas, came back to Denver and was looking for work with a college degree. That's all I had. And I happened to stumble onto Fort Logan Mental Health Center, which is 8 miles from where we're located right now, in the city of Denver, out south. And I'd never heard of Fort Logan Mental Health Center, ever. So I pulled into the driveway and I went in and asked the receptionist, is there any jobs that I qualified for with just a bachelor's degree? She looked up through her volume of all these job titles and said, yeah, there's 2. You can apply to be a recreational therapist or an industrial therapist. Well, I basically had a picture of what a recreational therapist was. I had no idea what an industrial therapist. And lo and behold, about 3 months later, I was called, do you want to apply? You have your application in. We'd like to interview you for a job in the industrial therapy program, which was a work center that was on the campus, and it was integrated into the treatment day for the patients, inpatients at Fort Logan. Just to preface, Fort Logan was created in the 1960s. It was the most progressive mental health center in the United States at that time. Progressive in that people were on first-name basis. It wasn't a medical model, et cetera, and they integrated a work program into the treatment day. And so an industrial therapist was someone who supervised patients coming to the work therapy program to work on subcontract work. While they were inpatients, they could earn a little bit of money and get back into the swing of working again. Now this is 1967, and so the majority of patients at the hospital were people that had worked significant amounts of their life, and so they already had a work ethic. And then mental illness hit, and so work for many of the individuals became very meaningful. No matter what the type of work, it was just the fact, I'm working, I'm doing something, I'm earning money. And so it was pretty clear to us that work was incredibly important in the lives of many individuals labeled as patients in a mental hospital. And let me just fast forward to 1969, which is 2 years later, and simply say that as a result of a national move to deinstitutionalize individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, along with individuals who were diagnosed as mentally ill, individuals were dumped back into the community, and I do mean dumped, at least for those that had a mental illness. And so Denver became the dumping ground for discharged patients. And patients were discharged within 90 days generally of admission. So there's a quick turnaround, and a lot of that was precipitated by the advent of medication, which, though it's not a cure, was a help to people that were not in a state of being able to function as well as they could. And so those that didn't have families or places to go when they were discharged, many of those individuals ended up in the Capitol Hill or Northwest Denver in board and care and nursing homes. And if you can picture Capitol Hill and the mansions that are there, many of those were converted, they were single-family mansions. Many of those were converted into 40-bed board and care homes run by private entrepreneurs who owned the properties. And so the state of Colorado paid those private entrepreneurs to house individuals with mental illness. Well, many of those individuals that ended up in Capitol Hill and in Northwest Denver were individuals that had come to the work therapy program regularly before they were discharged. And here they are in a board and care or a nursing home with nothing to do, literally nothing. And we visited, several of us from Fort Logan, we'd make visits to the board and care homes. We'd see individuals just kind of withering away, chain smoking cigarettes, with nothing to do. And so we went to the state legislature, to the Joint Budget Committee, and we asked for a supplemental appropriation to create a work therapy program in the community so that people didn't have to go out to Fort Logan just to work in a supported environment. And so we got a supplemental appropriation and one state full-time equivalent position. And we ended up renting a building at Bayaud and Cherokee on the corner for $320 a month. And that was about a third of what the Joint Budget Committee had given us. And then we had one state full-time position, and we were able to hire a couple of other individuals. In 1973, I continued to work at Fort Logan, and the director of Bayaud at that time, named after the street, by the way, Bayaud Avenue, in a Name That Program contest, he got himself into some legal trouble, pretty serious legal trouble, and he had to not be here anymore. And so they asked me to come down just on a temporary basis in 1973 and tell the employees that he was not coming back. And I did, and I stayed from 1973 till 2019.
Wow.
And as the executive
Kudos
director.
to you.
For most of that time, I was a state employee, well, 2/3 of that time. And then Fort Logan really couldn't justify having an FTE in the community as it became more of a traditional hospital, psychiatric hospital. It wasn't as inventive, innovative, and creative as it had been historically. So my position was on the line, and Bayaud hired me because Bayaud was created as a state program, but we became a nonprofit organization in 1972. So anyway, the evolution of Bayaud was simply that it was really clear to me and to others that so many of the people that were working at Bayaud were very capable of doing more than just being huddled together as a group. And so we began to work with area businesses on job placement. And we created the first transitional employment program in industry west of the Mississippi back in 1972. I was part of that creation. And when I came here in 73, just continued on, with a transition. And we began to expand, we began to grow. And over the years, we added federal contracting, where federal set-aside contracts, we would bid on those as a program that was serving individuals with disability. And we created some living wage and living benefits programs within federal government agencies as well as in the private sector. And those were permanent jobs, really, for individuals to, again, up the ante. And then I would say about 20 years ago, it became apparent that many of the individuals that had been discharged were living in board and care nursing homes. That was going out of vogue, and many of the mansions in Capitol Hill ended up being sold back to being single family or law offices or whatever, retrofitted. And so many of the individuals ended up as being homeless rather abruptly. And as that population got larger, we found a gentleman one morning that was living in our dumpster, our trash dumpster. And we invited him in. He was a little cold and blah, blah. And it turned out he was homeless, and he'd come here from Nebraska. He'd been in an institution for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities since he was 3 years old. Now he's an adult, and they kicked him out of that because he had aged out. And he came to Denver from Nebraska. Didn't know anybody, and it was really interesting because we were able to integrate him into our workforce. And that was the start of really opening ourselves up to the reality that many of the individuals that were living on the streets or living in shelters were individuals that really just needed an opportunity to work. And so as Bayaud evolved, and we began to create more and more of our own businesses, including a secure document shredding business, and other entrepreneurial activities, including taping all of Channel 9 news telecasts using VHS in the old days, and then commercially selling those to people that wanted a copy of the news. Those are the kind, we just were looking for any opportunity that would create a wider variety and provide more choices for individuals, while we always had in mind job placement and movement from Bayaud, always being movement oriented, forward thinking, and as we fast forward, when I retired in December of 2019, we at that time were serving about 1,500 individuals. Now, when we started Bayaud, we were serving 30. And those 30 individuals had all spent a minimum of 5 years in a state mental hospital in their background. And during the first 10 years of Bayaud's existence, we had one person that returned to the hospital for treatment, inpatient. And so it was really clear that work was something that would really provide some structure, dignity, stabilization, and treating people as employees and providing them with vacation and sick leave and paid holidays were humane ways to integrate people into the community. The fact that we're called Bayaud Enterprises versus the pride or the hope or some of the words that identify in a connotation that somehow we're just another charity. Yes, we are a charity, but it was voted on by the people that worked here that we wanted to be more normalized in the sense of our name. So hence we became Bayaud. And I'm proud of that to this day, because as the mission of Bayaud has expanded, again, when I retired a year later, we were serving as many as 3,000 plus individuals. And mainly, or most of those individuals were individuals that didn't have permanent housing. We got involved in housing by providing support services to existing low-income facilities in partnership with development companies that were also nonprofits. We expanded our relationship with the city of Denver and created the Bayaud Works program that provides temporary employment in a transitional way to people living on the streets, paid employment. And it kind of goes on. And then we really moved towards listening more closely to what people needed. And we created advisory committees that were made up of people that had lived experience with being homeless, lived experience with mental illness, addiction, abuse, a lot of different things. And as we convened those groups, and they gave us feedback on what they needed with our key question: what is it that gets in your way of working in this community? And we expected the typical things. Well, I don't have a permanent place to live. Transportation is tough. Those are the things we expected to hear. And all of a sudden, a couple of people piped up and said, "You know how hard it is to even think about working when we can't even do our laundry and put on a clean shirt and clean pair of pants to go for a job interview? We're staying in a shelter, and you have to line up to use the washing machines and the dryers." And the ding, I mean, it just hit. Well, we have a shredding business that has trucks. And what if we converted one of those trucks, when we buy a new truck, why don't we convert one of the older trucks, which still has an ability to get around the city, into a mobile laundry? And we looked around the country, and there was a gentleman, a church group in a small town in Washington that converted a van, it's a regular passenger van, into a mobile laundry with a couple of washers in it. And in Australia, where the same thing had happened in 3 or 4 of the different states within Australia. But that was it. There wasn't anywhere else.
Brilliant idea.
And so by creating this mobile laundry truck and putting 7 washing machines and 7 dryers.
Happy 21st birthday!
And putting 7 dryers in, we created the first effective multi-use, in other words, we could serve a lot of people. And we created the first mobile laundry truck in the country of that size and so-and-so. And now we have 2, and we're going to soon have a 3rd mobile laundry truck. And we also created a mobile shower truck. And our newest mobile laundry truck will also have a shower truck that goes with it, or a trailer that goes with it. And we go all over the city where people are. And that's another thing, is going where people are, rather than saying, well, you've got to come into a central place. And so like with Denver Day Works, people do meet at Civic Center Park, but we provide transportation to work sites all over Denver for individuals. We pay that individual on a daily basis in cash, and we provide services that will lead that person towards a more independent life. These are all things that evolved out of this 30-person operation in 1969 to now, and it's something that I think everybody that works here and everybody that's been a part of it can take pride in.